to thank all of those participants, moderators, panelists, and our audience for listening in to our community conversations on race. These are very important conversations that need to be heard, and we are grateful and happy that the audience has responded so well to them. We hope to continue these into the next year. Have a great new year and a safe new year. Thank you.
I feel like as an African American and as a Black man, we talk about. I think I shared with you before that there's things I don't talk about in mixed company, and so I have learned to kind of you kind of keep it inside because you don't want to deal with people who are in denial or people who are like white fragility that causes them to argue with everything you say. It's like, oh, it's just exhausting. And so I think that this stuff has been going on for hundreds of years, and it's just one thing after another. And where there's it feels like as a people we get some hope that things are going to change, and then all of a sudden it doesn't. And not only is it institutional and systemic, that it's in a lot of ways it's kind of it's horrific in a lot of ways, because you think you're told that there's this sunset that you're going off to and things are going to be okay, but essentially every turn, you look at voting rights, you look at civil rights, there's been a chipping away of, you feel like, oh, we got it, so we're heading somewhere, and then all of a sudden, there's a chipping away, there's a shiny thing over there that we're worried about, the economy or something, or we don't move on because we can't. It's the waters that we swim in. But for white America, it's very easy for them to just move on and go on to the next most important thing, while we kind of grovel and feel like we're being left behind, and literally are being left behind. And
we're dealing with a group of people who's trying to fight for equality. I want to say it again. We're dealing with a group of people who are fighting for equality. We haven't been equal, and so they're fighting to be equal. I think the real reason why we're upset is because we thought we were. We thought we were all together in this. We thought that you loved us as a society and we loved you. So our heart broke when we realized that our society wasn't with us. And so you're seeing hurt and you're seeing pain. I don't want you to take it as seeing a Black or seeing a negative, broken home. No, we're just dealing with individuals who are saying we want equality. So I think if we go forward, it's hard when people ask us, what do you guys want, right? You got to say equality, and then you have to break it down to what equality looks like. So my challenge to everyone is to go ahead and break down what equality looks like, and then explain it to someone. The frustration in that alone is difficult.
But all right, next question. Can you tell us your thoughts about the killing of George Floyd?
Yes. I guess one word sums it up, that for me would be horrible, right? I don't think that there's one person that I've met that looks at that and thinks that that was okay. For me, and I know for the people at the Santa Rosa Police Department, it was a terrible thing. That is, again, not something anybody that I know of that approves of it. That officer made a terrible decision. And when I look at it, even if there was a reason to, so if there's a reason to arrest somebody, then we have to make the arrest. But once we make an arrest, that person goes into the care of that particular officer. And it's very clear that care was not taken.
We were talking about this a little while ago. Joy and I were that I didn't have an ethnic studies class until I was off at college, right? And so your understanding of what your own privilege is framed by what your experiences are in the community that you grow up in. And it's one of those times where, for me, that story also helps to reflect that I did have a privilege in that moment, and my mom was fighting to try to help folks who didn't have that same privilege. And so moving forward, it's been something that I've really been focused on, is trying to figure out how do I best represent the whole community to make sure that everybody feels heard, to make sure that just because I'm not in a position where I particularly need one thing or another, that we don't still provide that to our community, and we don't still hear that voice and move it forward.
What do we feel is really necessary to see changed immediately in our community, to feel safer, to feel more comfortable between ourselves and the community? And yeah, I think they're just ultimately going about holding those conversations in some way, in a more productive way than we're currently seeing, would be really great. And I'm really glad, even to be hearing from Chris right now, they have their own concerns as well with how the communication's been going, and ways to kind of, alter the conversation. So I'm really glad to hear that that's already kind of being discussed, because I think that that's where we're going to, start to see that foundation being laid. The strongest, especially, is with that communication, and with feeling like we can actively, freely communicate, communicate that anger, communicate that upset without being met, with any violence or, a negative response on the side of, our representatives, but as well as having our city speak very openly with us, not necessarily only saying what we want to hear, because of course, not every answer is going to be a good answer. And frankly, we need to hear those bad answers, if there is a bad answer to a question, or, something that you think the general population won't be satisfied with, that is, I think, very fair to just disclose that and, hear that we are not, satisfied with that, or hear that it's not what we believe to be fair or just. And I think that's how we're going to start to see that communication, is have the hard conversations, so that we can, ultimately have those good ones as well.
And then you have mentioned that did you even see some lynchings?
Well, I didn't see any lynchings. Of a friend of mine, when I say friend, he was a couple of grades older than me, so we went to the same school, but we knew each other and we considered each other's friends. But yes, this lynching thing that we're seeing right now, that seems sporadic, and this is not new. This is not unheard of. It's happened before. I was in ninth grade, and a schoolmate of mine, he was found hung from his parents' patio, hands tied behind his back, and he was beaten, and it was ruled a suicide. So, and that's one of the main things I want to put across in this panel. I'm surprised when people say, "Oh, I can't believe this is going on," or "This can't be going on." Yes, this is par for the course. I hate to say it like that, but growing up where I grew up, and all across the South, and really across the country, but it's really highlighted in the South, this is not new. Dare I say it, it's really close to new.
It's, looking at my dad, I remember, being in the car with him as a young child, and him getting pulled over and getting searched, and seeing it from that perspective as a child, and to see him going through that, and not, I was probably a teenager. Actually, one of the times I had just gotten my driver's license, and they said there was some unpaid ticket or something. We were in East Texas, and, they put him in the squad car, and I had to drive and follow with him. And, the 10, 11 at night, just had my driver's license, and he's going fast. And I'm thinking, is he trying to get me too? That's the kind of stuff, as a Black man, you think about, where it's like, is this a setup? Because you really got to take somebody to jail. I mean, I don't know at that age if he had a ticket or not, but my dad just kind of went along with it. But, I'm driving the car, trying to keep up. My sister's in the back seat, crying, doing all this. And we were just going to see family.
Slow. That made me think of that Fresh Prince episode where Carlton got pulled over for driving too slow, and Will Smith is trying to tell him, no, that's not a thing. people see that and they're like, no, that's just a TV show, but no, that's real life. That's real life, man.
Since we're on police, I'm just going to stay here for a moment. My dad was career Army, was at Two Rock, and he was always real hard on me growing up. Just reminded me that you can't do what all these other kids can do. I mean, those people from Sonoma County, I'm talking 70s, 80s, growing up, Yulupa, Bennett Valley, Slater, I was like one of the only Black kids with my sister and a few others. Kathy, I'm sure you're watching, hello. But he was really hard on me, and I was always like, Dad, it's not a big deal, okay? You know, I can not have my license and not a big deal, all that kind of stuff. But I remember I didn't have any big problems here, but I just remember when I was my first year of college up at University of Washington, had my backpack on, my Timberlands. I was like, everything's cool. I was excited, you know, freshman in college. And I was just walking along the street at 5 o'clock. It was like rush hour. Everyone was out. And I was just walking slowly. I saw another cop car rolling to my side, going as slow as I was walking for like a minute. And then he hits his lights and comes over right in front of me, stops traffic. Everyone's looking at me. I was like, yeah? He's like, you, here. Had my hands up on the car, his hand on my back, calling the walkie-talkie, chatting, and I'm just sitting there with my hands up on the car, like 19 years old. Like, and then basically he just, after 2 minutes, he's like, you know what? You can go, you match the description.
For me, coming to Sonoma County, as a Black man, it was almost like I was invisible, because in the South, where I grew up, and even to this day, if you walk into a restaurant, as a Black man, the whole restaurant stands still. They're watching you, so making sure that you're not doing anything crazy. They're, what is this boy doing around here? And so to come out here and not see that was refreshing, but it's like that in other ways. You know what I'm saying? So it's disheartening, man. It's really disheartening. It's like, where can I go? I've literally driven from one side of the country to the other, and I have not been able to escape it. Where can I go so that my children, my son and my 6-year-old son and my 15-year-old daughter can just live life?
So my husband is white, and so our kids are mixed. And so my kids are, I would say, fortunate to grow up in a family that's half Black, Kenyan, and half white. So they have, and my friends that I grew up with from various other cultures, they have all of that around them. So it's not uncommon for my kids to go to a family get together, whether it be our family or another friend's family, and hear different languages, hear different cultures, dance, music, that kind of thing.
I have felt over the last 3 months a fire in me to not only raise my kids not to be racist, but to aggressively raise them to be anti-racist and acknowledge privilege and vocally acknowledge my own and look at my life and do more, take the privilege that I have just because of the color of my skin and do something with it, and teach my kids to do that, and to never be silent, ever, and to admit that I know that there have been times where I have been too silent in situations. And so to look at myself and be honest, and to have those conversations with my kids, even though Lennon is 4, I have started to have more conversations than I did by the time Soul was 4. And something about now and with what I am seeing, it's making me angry, and I'm just trying to turn that into action.
How do you know when when, at what age is it appropriate to start having those conversations with your kids? It's hard to know because you never know when it's going to happen. I was saying, I think I told you guys before that my nephew, when he was he may have been about 4 years old and at a playground, and he's mixed race, but a kid called him the N-word. So, and at that age, you're innocent, you probably don't know what it means yet, but at what point do you start having those discussions with young kids without putting fear in them about other people and other races?
And Letitia, you are very much in the business space.
Yes.
What do you think about the access and opportunity?
I agree with them both. From experience, when I went to start a company, I was, attempting to get a loan, and I got laughed at when I said I wanted to, start a company, and I couldn't get a loan. It was very difficult. I had to work a lot harder. And I knew other people, especially other women, white women, that were starting their businesses, getting access to capital, starting their businesses while I'm still struggling to figure out why are people laughing at me when I'm, trying to get money.
But, I did stage my own protest, and I did it in a way that was impactful, with the photo of, wine country Black women standing on the stairs of the museum. That was my protest, for people to see us and stop pretending that we didn't exist. And, they wrote an article about it. And one of the things that I have said, and I keep saying, is that sometimes as Black women, it's a chicken or an egg thing. Are we Black first or are we women first? And I think we stand on the front lines of two wars, but we are always the people in the back. We're not the decision makers, and I think that has to stop. So with that photo, that was me saying, hey, we're here and you can't ignore us. So, while it wasn't, what Amber is doing, which is amazing, and I applaud her, and I'm always telling people to contact her about many things. That photo for me was a sign of rebellion. It was pretty, but it was also this very dramatic statement to be making as a Black woman.
Awesome. How about for you, Amber? How has Black Lives Matter changed your business?
It's changed it in a lot of ways, I think, with Amused blog and the income that it generates. It's come to a halt, actually. I have a lot of contracts that, need fulfillment, but at this time, I've reached out to them specifically, and I've said, in this moment of time and for this span, right now, I'm not doing sponsored content. Promoting a new skincare line, if it's not owned by a person of color, I don't feel like promoting it. Promoting clothing, promoting any type of sort of business, if it's not owned by a person of color, specifically a female, like a Black female, I'm not promoting it right now. And the businesses have been very understanding, which I appreciate. It's also impacted my business in ways that I am learning how to navigate spaces that I haven't really taken up space in before. And that's been a really good learning experience for me in several ways. My platform has given me the opportunity to reach more people with a message that I'm more passionate about than ever before. And I think that that's really important.
I have an 18-year-old son. Sorry, every time my 18-year-old son, he's multiracial, but he's seen, when you look at him, he's Black. And the conversations that I've had to have with him about, he saved up a bunch of money for 2 years to buy himself a car, a beautiful Lexus. He pays everything on, he's worked hard, he pays every month, and he drives that car around. And sometimes he works late when he was working for an event company. And the conversations that I start having with him is, if you get pulled over by the police, don't reach for your glove box, keep your hands on the steering wheel. These kind of conversations that I'm always having, even when he walks to get the mail at our PO box, at our box, I'm just be careful, watch your back. And I keep asking myself, why do I have to do that with my son? And people don't understand, specifically white people, what that is like as a mother, and these conversations that I have to be having with my son. And he's asking, well, my white friends, parents aren't talking to them about those kind of things, and him trying to understand as he goes into this world, as he's almost 18, he's about to go in that world. And it's scary for me as a mom to think that I don't want to get that phone call, that they thought he was accidentally reaching. So it's scary. It's scary.
This is another question from someone. I have not experienced much diversity personally. what are one or two tangible things that someone like me, without a lot of friends who are Black, can do to help support social change?
Have uncomfortable conversations.
But the first 30 years of my life was basically my own struggle of coming out, being a gay man, and being comfortable in my own skin. And then in the late 80s, I was in New York City at the time and kind of fell into activism when AIDS started to blow up in New York City. I happened to be at the Gay and Lesbian Center the evening that ACT UP New York got started. Raised my hand, joined the board the first night, and so got a deep dive into nonviolent civil disobedience. We shut down Wall Street one day and got arrested. I taught civil disobedience, so I got a real big dose of movement building. But like Lori Lynn, I felt like I checked that box. I was the good gay activist, and kind of that was the extent of my activism. A couple of years ago, I had the great privilege of having the opportunity to go on a civil rights pilgrimage to the South. I got on a bus with 40 other people, mostly from Seattle, because it was organized by the University of Washington. And we retraced the path of the civil rights movement through Tennessee, Alabama, and Mississippi. And for the first time in my life, I saw the real truth of what happened during that time. It was about 50 years after that time, and people were beginning to retell the truth of what happened. It was transformative, to say the least. It was a real eye-opener for me. I came back with such a commitment to do something, but I had an experience of that beloved community on that trip. The power of the trip were the people that were there, the interracial, intergenerational space that was created. And once you have an experience of that beloved community, you will fight for it forever, and you will be in search of it everywhere you go. So since I got back, I've been in search of finding it, building it, and becoming a part of it. And that's why I'm at this conversation tonight.
Have I ever felt threatened by law enforcement? Yes, I have.
I believe I was probably like 16 at this. Yeah, I was 16 at this point. So I was still in high school. I was at Bodega with my friends, and I believe we were probably out there past like sunset. So I believe that Bodega has a curfew. We were just in our car. We were actually heading out from the beach, and an officer had pulled over a car next to us, like a car from the street. They pulled into the parking lot at the beach. The officer got out of the car, looked in their car, was like talking with them, and super quickly just turned, that car remained there, but she quickly turned around and approached our car. And then, kind of asked us to roll down the window, asked us what we were doing there, so on. We told her that we had just, gotten back to the car, we're heading out. She proceeded to kind of look through the whole car. Then she asked the driver, as well as the passenger, if they had been drinking or intoxicated in any way. Smoking. They were both like, no, nothing, whatever. She then proceeded to go to the back seat, which is where I was, and shine the light in the car. And she asked me if I was intoxicated, to which I said no, which I was not. And she said, "I don't believe you." And I was like, okay, that's very, I wasn't really sure how to respond, to not escalate the situation. So she asked me again, she said, "Tell me that you're not intoxicated." And I was like, "I'm not intoxicated. I've not had anything this night at all." She then asked me for my ID. I was only 16 at the time. I didn't have my license, actually. I wasn't the one driving. So I didn't have anything. I didn't have any ID. And I told her that. I was like, I have my school ID, if that would work. And she was like, "I don't believe you. I'm going to end up searching you if you don't give me some type of ID." So I just showed her my school ID. I was like, "I genuinely don't have anything." She then told me as well that if I didn't give her any weed or anything like alcohol, if I had it on me, that she would try to arrest me and that I would get charged. So that was definitely, I would say, the first time I would say the first time that I personally felt very threatened and singled out. And I will say that the rest of the people in the car were white. None of them got asked even twice. And I not only got asked multiple times, but also threatened with arrest. So I would say definitely, I have felt threatened, whether it be directly or I've been in situations where my friends have also been threatened. So yeah, that's definitely what I would say overall. Is that there's been multiple accounts of that I have definitely felt personally threatened or had, instances where I've not felt very protected by the officers that were there. I would like to see, at least at the very least, our police department make a stand, whether that be for their discussion, whether that be an actual event, a stand and a statement with the Black Lives Matter movement and with the brown and Black community. It is time for blue to black, not back in the blue.
Actually, it's Claire, I wanted to start with you. You've lived through the 50s and 60s when civil rights was at its height, some would say. What would you say about that period versus this period? What are kind of your observations?
There's not much difference, which is sad. I am amazed at the inventiveness of supremacists. Well, for 400 years, folks have worked on how to not work and how make someone else do the work for them, or have someone else do the work for them. I'd like to say a lot has changed, and it hasn't. What's going on in Kenosha, in Wisconsin right now is breaking my heart. And as much as I believe in Black Lives Matter, I want the people who are involved to stay home. Since the President of the United States has sent people out to do what the patty rollers and people have done for 400 years, please stay home and save your lives. I don't want to see anybody else killed who looks like me.
You know, staying there, you say that not much has changed. Some would say that we couldn't vote before, now we can vote. We couldn't intermarry before, now we can intermarry. All of these things that seem to be policies that have changed. So why would you say that nothing has changed?
The more things change, the more they remain the same, the more they change. We're still being lynched. There is still lynching going on in the United States of America. It may not be with a rope and a tree, but it's still happening.
Unfortunately, Claire put it so well. Everything has changed, but nothing has changed. And so it is ridiculous and outrageous that in 2020, we have Black men and women and children being killed, being murdered, being lynched when they're innocent and unarmed. What is going on?
Well, Dr. Johnson and Claire both are really spot on with it. I mean, there really is a lot that has not changed. I would say to your question earlier about, laws and public policy decisions, I do feel like a lot of it is the checkbox. So you give people the right to vote, and then you have intentional systemic voter suppression, right? Or you say, oh, you can go to any school you want to, but then you set up systems in place that are based on property taxes, right? So you're going to create more disparity and more divide based on the systems and the policies that continue to exist in this country. And so I think, in my opinion, because I was not around during the civil rights movement, but I do see a lot of parallels between what I've read, and the stories I've heard from others and what we see playing out right now. It is like a really horrible, bad loop of oppression and violence and degradation and disparity. And I do think if there's two things that I personally think that are a little bit different or make what we are seeing right now in 2020 somewhat different, it's something that Ollie just talked about. It's the youth. I do see a ton of young people that are mobilized, that this is a catalyst for them. They're saying things like, and I'm not even offended by like, oh, I'm not my mama, I'm not my grandma, I'm not going to turn the other cheek. The time for that is over. And I think you see that. And I do also think that because we are in the digital age, that has made a difference. We have social media, we have all these different digital platforms that push these things out to the forefront in a way that maybe people could have been in, we know how people do. They like to deny things. They like to say, oh, that's an isolated incident. oh no, that's, they're just exaggerating. Oh, those same narratives that we hear over and over and over to minimize the trauma and to minimize the extent of the brutality that Black people have faced in this country since its beginning.
Claire, how are protesters supposed to remain at home? You mentioned that you want to keep people should just be staying at home. If our voices cannot be heard in the streets, if we are incarcerated at the rates that we are, with the majority of felonies removing us from the voting process, how can our voices be heard?
I don't know the answer to that right now, but as long as the president of this country is sending out goon squads, brown shirts, jackbooted thugs to kill people while they are legally protesting, Black lives matter to me. I want them to stay alive and fight the good fight in another way. I'm not the brain to tell you what should happen right now, but I cannot stand to see another young Black man wantonly destroyed because some jerk who decides he wants to be a policeman decides that he's going to kill my son, my brother, my father. I can't stand it. I cannot stand it. It's breaking me to the core.
My parents really, I think in the generation that they grew up in, really wanted us to assimilate. And so they didn't speak Spanish to us. And so, growing up, we always felt, and this is a conversation I've had with my sisters and some of my cousins, is that we never felt like we were accepted in either place. We were never Mexican enough, for the Mexicans because we didn't speak Spanish and we didn't always follow the same, traditions and things like that. And so feeling like we were in between those worlds and just not really fitting in anywhere, and growing up saying, okay, gosh, Mom, I wish you had spoken Spanish to us because I think I would have fit in better. So kind of feeling, that as I grew up and even now, I'll sometimes have people say, well, you're not, you're one of those white Mexicans or you're the Mexican vanilla. And it's true, you feel that way that you're not totally fitting in.
I clearly remember telling myself, if I ever want people to listen to what I have to say, I'm gonna have to get rid of my accent. And so sometimes I wonder if the way that I talk was to assimilate one and to make sure that people accepted me for who I was. There are times where I feel very, very nervous and my accent I feel comes out and it kind of betrays me. And so I feel sometimes guilty that it comes out because I feel like I'm gonna have somebody point at me and be like, she doesn't belong here.
And for me, I see it a lot sometimes in, talking to other Latinos as well. You come across people who say, oh, I didn't even, it kind of crossed my mind that you looked Latina, but I figured it was only half or it was only part of the way, because you don't have an accent when you talk. And so the first thing that when someone says that, I just think, oh, so you automatically assume those that are from Latino backgrounds or who are Latino are immigrants, or they all come here illegally. Like you're already putting these people in a category. And, it's always that battle of why are we all being put into this box and then have to prove ourselves to be out of it or to not be part of it.
If you were an immigrant child graduating from high school, you had to pay out of state tuition, which was 3 or 4 times more than a resident. So luckily I was able to get some scholarships and I did 1 year at Sonoma State. But then there was no money. And so I hit a point where there was like a little bit of depression because for me, it's like, I worked so hard to be able to get accepted into the university. This dream that was sold to me in high school by my teachers, that anybody could go to school and anybody could graduate and anybody could get a good, decent job and have a good paying job and eventually buy a house and have a car. Like all of that was sold to me. And I did everything that I was in my power to get to that point, only to realize that, yes, maybe I was going to graduate and I was going to be in debt, but I wasn't going to be able to work regardless of all my skills and all the effort that I put in school, because without a social security number, you can't get a decent job. So for a really long time, you know, after I graduated high school and I did my 1 year at Sonoma State, I decided just to go to the JC because it was cheaper. And there was like no point in me anymore in going into, you know, getting a degree because I wasn't going to be able to do anything with it anyways. So, you know, for a while I was working at a retail store, and I just remember always being like mad and depressed about like feeling like I had so much more to give. And again, just because of a 9-digit number, I couldn't do that. So I had to be put again, like what we've talking about, like a category of being like a brown person doing, which there's nothing wrong with it. But again, when you're sold this dream and you want to fulfill that, and just because of a 9-digit number, you can't do it. So I ended up, you know, getting pregnant and having a son, and I did everything that I could at the JC. I was ready to transfer again to a 4-year university, but it was the whole thing of like, what for? You're not going to be able to do anything anyway. So DACA came about. My son was born in 2011, and then DACA was accepted, or it became a thing in 2012. So I applied. I was very scared because again, it's just putting yourself out there, having the fear that immigration eyes, La Migra, can come and get you and you know, you're taken away. So I took the risk. I was granted like I said, my social security, my work permit, and it opened up this whole world of opportunity. And again, you know, once I had it, I almost went through another depression, because it was almost like, here I am, I'm almost 25. I have no schooling. On record, I have no skills that I can show to an employer why I would be a good person to get hired. So it's a funny thing, because one of my first interviews that I had, I actually cried. And it was very sad after I was done, because I was like, I can't believe I cried in an interview. But it was almost like I was begging for an opportunity, you know, for people to see that I had like all these skills and all these things to give. I'm sorry, it always gets me. And yet, you know, I didn't have anything to show.
This is, I believe, day 58 for me serving on City Council of Healdsburg. So with my fellow councilwomen, I'm the newest to the bunch. I got involved because there was a community need for me to get involved. And as you just illustrated, it's, you know, I'm only the third Latinx council member in Healdsburg's 153-year history, and a third of our population within the city limits is Latino, Latina, Latinx. And so I'm proud to say that I was appointed during the era of the strong discourse, national discourse and dialogue around Black Lives Matter. And so I saw a community need for my voice. I looked around as an individual, and, you know, I've been serving my community for over a decade in nonprofit work and with work at our community endowment at Healdsburg Forever. And when this conversation came to our city of Healdsburg, I kept looking around. I'm like, you know, who can I help uplift? Who can I help support? Who can I mentor? I looked around. I said, Ozzy, it's you.
I have been given the task. Oh, you communicate with the Latino community. Oh, you do that. Oh, you do the translation, etc., etc. Well, you know, the Latino community should be and ought to be and has to be the concern of all council members. And if you want to learn more about the Latino community, about the languages spoken in our community, you just have to speak to people. You have to find the opportunities and the places to engage with others. Yes, I have been pigeonholed as a Latino representative. What happens if I don't run next time? What happens if I'm not elected a second term? Who's gonna be the voice for the Latino community? It has to be all of the council members. It cannot be just one person.
I have experienced many challenges quite frankly, I think as one who graduated from college with this idealism that I was going to go out and make a difference, you enter the work world and you realize that things are not created equal. You realize that equal employment opportunity laws exist on paper, but not always in reality. And so for me personally, that was a big wake-up call, like, whoa. You know, I always thought that hard work, my talent, and good work product would get me ahead in life and in the workplace. And when you realize that other factors are at play, like I mentioned, informal systems of maybe behind the scenes, people being given certain work opportunities that will lead to advancement, and that those things are being denied to you, and you only happen to stumble across your awareness that these things are happening because you happen to come across it. That to me has been a very eye-opening experience.
So when it comes to Latinx, which seems to be like a term of the day, just wondering what you guys thought about that and how you identify. And Martha, I'd love to hear you, especially as a linguist, how do you feel about that term and how you identify?
Well, you know, I believe that all this terminology has come around to please the white person. Really. So that you could call us something and put us in a category, you know, because that's what it is. Now, I will go along as long as you serve my objectives, which is to have equity, inclusivity, and acknowledgement of our existence as people.
You know, I think about how, you know, I often think that Black people are like the canary in the coal mine for America, and maybe, you know, oppressed people everywhere are always the canaries in the coal mine for their societies, because they are the ones who are so immediately affected by any kind of anything that's negative that's going on in the society. Those people are the ones who feel it first and feel it more deeply. You know, thinking about, for example, coronavirus in the case of our society is just one situation where you've got something that's deeply affecting, that's affecting Black people more because of the intersection of race and class that we have in our society, and the caste system that we have in our society. And then you see how the fact that Black and brown people have been more affected with it has caused certain members, certain people, certain cohort in the white community to maybe not be as careful and to not care as much about coronavirus, even though it is affecting them. And they're not immune to it, but just the fact that it is affecting, that there is a narrative that, oh, it's affecting Black and brown people, so I don't have to care as much about this. There's definitely that aspect of it. And it just tells you that, when it comes to the politics of this country, Black Lives Matter, the way that Black people are treated in this country is going to have an effect on everyone.
Answer the question when it comes to equity, equality, you want to call it a mortgage, you want to call it interest, you want to call it dividends, it doesn't matter what we call it. We know what matters is we've been missing a lot. I believe a couple of weeks ago, Dwayne referenced the Sonoma County portrait by the Sonoma County Health Department. When our standard of living is lower than Mississippi's, the lowest ranked state, we have a problem. I don't care what you want to call it. We have a problem. What entails that problem? For me, it's that we don't have representation. I mean, just look at what somebody just stated a little bit ago, the amount of people that we have suffering with the COVID. I believe Jorge said 50%. These are the issues that we're having. This is what we need to focus on. When it was Big Man Howard, I remember he and I had long conversations about, and just so you know, that's one of the founding members of the Black Panthers. We had long conversations about how Black and brown needed to work together for a better future. These are all things that I believe it comes down to the future and hope. What am I as a city council member going to do to make sure that we improve the quality of life is make sure that no one works harder than myself. I don't care if it's raining or burning outside. I was a little bit not so burning a couple of days ago, but I look like a lobster that survived the first round. But no, for me, I push. I'm not sorry that I'm not a conventional politician or candidate. I am sorry that I don't have the level of education as my fellow candidates. What I'm not sorry for is that passion matters. For me, passion is what drives us beyond a story or a book or a fable. For me, I must complete this. This is exactly my reason of being. So when we're speaking of what am I going to do to help with equity, it's exactly what I've been doing my entire life, and that's fight for my people. So whatever Eddie going to continue to do, Eddie's going to continue to fight.
What advice would you give to a young girl who one day might want to run for office or be in public service?
Probably just to do it, to get out there and, you know, take a chance. And if you have something to say, and if you're led by your heart and it's a passion, I don't feel like I have one specific thing that I'm looking at in running for Santa Rosa City Council. I just want to make a difference. I want to serve our community in a different capacity than I already have. And I think it's important for us to not be scared to let our voices be heard and to follow our hearts and our passions. And mine is definitely to serve. So I would tell her to do it. And I would say to the current leaders that we have and other adults and leaders in organizations that we need to mentor our young girls, and we need to mentor our young boys and let them know that, you know, don't be intimidated or scared to do things that you don't really see all the time, or you don't know people that are doing that, because you can do anything. And I think if people can agree on anything with President Obama being president, is that it showed people that you can, any race, any ethnicity, anything, like you can be the president of the United States, which is one of the highest offices. So yeah, I would just tell them to go for it.
Chinte'e, how are you? That's our Eastern Pomo language, also known as Batsal. That comes from the Big Valley Rancheria and Scotts Valley Band of Pomo Indians over in the Lakeport, Lake County area. I am Pomo Wailaki Maidu from here in Northern California. My grandmother's tribe comes from Northern Oregon, and my mother's people are indigenous from parts of Mexico and Nicaragua. And I was taught that we always give recognition, we always honor the people and the ancestors that we come from. So I always introduce them before I introduce myself.
Everyone. My name is Esther Labrado, and I'm a citizen of the North Fork Rancheria of Mono Indians and a descendant of the Morongo Band of Mission Indians. Both are California tribes. On my grandmother's side, my Mono grandmother is from Central California, that's Mono territory, and my Kuya grandfather is that's Southern California.
Hello, good evening, how are you? I'm Brenda Flies with Hawks, and I identify as Salagi, Eastern Cherokee, and my ancestors' roots take me all the way back to Cherokee, what is now called Cherokee, North Carolina. I am Bird Clan. I come from a matrilineal society, so we follow our mother's side. Both of my parents are from the Salagi Eastern Cherokee Nation. My father is Bird Clan, my father is Deer Clan, and my mother is Bird Clan. I was raised with all the, the teachings of our people, practicing those teachings and principles, spiritual principles, and particularly as I was growing up. I was raised in a 4-generational household, so it wasn't uncommon to have my grandmothers and my aunties and uncles and grandparents in the house on a daily basis. And I believe that I feel very blessed to have been raised in that environment.
Ashita Sheepsock. Hello, everyone. How are you all? Just want to say thank you to Rose for that beautiful prayer and land acknowledgement. I think that was a great way to start this. And thank you for inviting me and all the panelists. I'm honored to sit here with you and have this conversation. Like you guys said, not only on behalf of ourselves, but our ancestors and the future generation. So I'm glad that we can take this moment to educate people and to have an exchange with a broader community. My name is Tasha Friday. I am Wichita, Kiowa, and Caddo from Oklahoma. And I'm lucky enough to live on the ancestral territory of the Wichita people there in Oklahoma. So while we were removed from some of our land, I still get to live where my ancestors did. So I was raised by my Wichita grandmother. So I have a lot of traditional teachings and really try to live my life in a very traditional way that's respectful of all of those who came before me. And, you know, I'm fortunate to have had those teachings. Not all of us do have that opportunity. And so really laid the path for my life.
You know, you brought up the part about being enrolled and disenrolled. And, you know, one of the topics that came up when we were planning this discussion was the topic of sovereignty. And I think it's important to address that because myself included and many watching, I would think, don't know what this means to the indigenous community. So can you tell us what this means and what it means for indigenous communities? So I'm going to have Tasha start, because I know in our discussions, you know, you definitely had a lot to say on that. So
sure. So I think you know, the concept of sovereignty is very multifaceted when you're talking about indigenous people. So we have the dictionary definition, right? So that's the inherent right to govern ourselves and the legal implications of that dictionary definition and how we work government to government with the United States and the states that we live in. And that looks different all over Indian country. For instance, in California, you guys are a PL 280 state. That's a totally different ball of wax than what we have going on in Oklahoma. So it can look completely different what sovereignty is contextually for different tribal nations when it's being applied. But I think most importantly, the impact of sovereignty is on identity and empowerment of our people, and particularly our young people. So even within our own communities, I don't think that sometimes we've really wrapped our heads around what sovereignty is and what it means to us and what power it gives us. And I think when we start to understand that and take that back, because we've always been sovereign, right? And so someone said, you guys are sovereign, and we didn't get a prize. We've always been our own nations. We've always been able to govern ourselves, but we're taking that back and reclaiming that, then that is where we're making the difference. I mean, there's all sorts of legal things that we can do to enforce that sovereignty, but we have to own it and internalize it and live it and behave sovereign for it to be really impactful and beneficial for our people. And I think, like I said, that goes back to empowering young people by showing them what that is and modeling for them what that is and giving them the voice to speak up when necessary and remind people that we're sovereign.
Those are all books, all resources.
Yeah.
Simple Google search. Look up Native American authors, look up, you know, Native authors talking about genocide, their own tribal histories. And even us as Native people, we got to educate ourselves too. And, you know, I did a talk earlier and I was telling some young people, you know, when we're in this kind of position, you know, in that leadership role, that leadership position, we have to hold ourselves accountable. You know, if I say I'm going to do something or, you know, present myself in a certain way, I need to walk my talk. I can't just, oh, look at all these resources and not know about those resources. I have to go and check them out myself, you know. And, you know, ever since I was a young person, I've always been like the token Native person to get up and have to talk about our history. And I've had to tell teachers that I don't know everything. You know, I'm not an elder. I'm not a teacher or an educator in that sense. You know, I'm still learning about who I am. I'm still learning about my culture every day. And even now, you know, being able to sit with so many elders and other teachers and other young people like myself, I'm always learning. You know, I will learn new things until I pass on to that other side, to that other world. And we learn from each other all the time, just as we receive knowledge from each other. And it's, you know, again, it's not about, you know, who knows the most, who's the smartest Indian. It's not about that. We're here to uplift and help one another learn. And if need be, you know, someone needs to be that auntie and put us in check too, you know, and we have to walk this way humbly. And, you know, I think what I've learned with working with a lot of different allies this year is I'm really tired of hearing non-Native people asking for forgiveness for what their ancestors have done to our ancestors. And, you know, I have to take that step in myself and say what's on my heart. And, you know, learning about all of this wrongdoing that happens to our Native women, it's not okay to have someone try to apologize for the rape and for the genocide that had happened and is continuing to happen. I want people to acknowledge what has happened in the past and move forward as an ally in a good way. You know, educate yourself. You know, I appreciate what all of us have said here tonight, you know, and we are strong, we are resilient, we are still here. And it's time for people to take a good look at who we are and to know that we're all different, but one thing that every single person here has in common is that at the end of the day, we're all people.
At the age of 14, summer going into 9th grade, I got my first job. So I started working in the fields, in the vineyard fields with my con un tío and my dad and other relatives. So I learned what that was like, right? I learned the job. I learned waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, driving 45 minutes out to Pope Valley, to Calistoga, to, you know, the outskirts, and just being there, you know, until 5 o'clock, no matter the heat, no matter the temperature, you know, we were there working hard. But what I learned from that was I could do it and I was good at it, but because I was a young and I had an able body to do it, right? Some of my colleagues at the time who were Mistillos, and, you know, they've been doing this for 10, 15, 20 years. You know, their bodies are now wearing down. Their knees, their backs, their hands, everything was wearing down. So something that I got out of it was like, how long can you sustain this type of work and this type of labor? And that's something that really encouraged me to, you know, pursue education to the point that I have. You know, I'm just very thankful. I'm just very thankful because without them and without the example of my older sister, Denise, you know, she's a chingona, right? She's, man, if it wasn't for her, I would not have my master's degree right now.
And
right?
One thing that really stood out for me was like the part about the body wearing down, because like, I think it was this weekend, I text my mom. I was like, hey, we're going to the pumpkin patch because the girls wanted to go. My little kids wanted to go to the pumpkin patch. And my mom was like, oh no, like, you know, una vaca le pegó tu papá. Like there was a cow that kicked my dad, right? Because he works in the dairy farming industry. And so he got kicked by a cow and he's going to go with a sobador. And so, right, doesn't go to the clinic, goes with a sobador to like, you know, fix up his bones and his muscle. But I've seen my dad, my mom had this like bone that was like coming out of her hand recently. And it's just the wear and tear of years of work. Like my parents are like the hardest working people I know. I'm pretty lazy compared to them. Like I feel like I have a pretty good work ethic, but like it's not on their level. Like they work, and but the thing that concerns me is like seeing them now 30 plus years later of them giving their bodies to this country, and seeing at the end of the road, like they've been talking more and more of like, hey, what does this look like in 10 years? Do we go back to Mexico? And like, they don't have a retirement, right? Like they don't have a 401k or an IRA or Social Security, right? Like this is it, like the wages that they earn in their able-bodied years, like that's all they could take with them. They got nothing to fall back on that they didn't, were able to generate their wages, that there's no social safety net at the end for them. And yet for me, like there's a part of me that like, that's infuriating, right? That's like, they're the essential workers now, right? And yet like they're not going to be able to see, they're having to make a decision about whether they stay in this country or go back, because they've got to make a calculus at the retirement age of how am I going to be able to provide for myself, because Social Security is not waiting at the end of the road for me. Like, what am I going to do?
Can we talk a little bit about model minority and the myths and what it means specifically for the Asian community? Let's first start by talking about what the model minority is, the definition itself. Jerry, can you take that?
Absolutely. I'll try to take it as best as I can. I had to go look up my Asian American Studies undergrad stuff. So it's been a long minute. The thing about it is it's lived experience. You know it, you feel it, you experience it, and then you got to go, okay, wait, what's the actual definition again? But really what we're talking about is model minority myth, and it's rooted and based in Asian American stereotypes, right? So these stereotypes are Asians are all high achieving, Asians are well-behaved, Asians are hardworking and follow rules, right? And some folks are going to be like, what's the deal with that? It's a positive stereotypes. Why are you flipping out, Jerry? What's wrong with it, right? And so what happens is when you're having, the first is just the pressure, right? The pressure to live up to that. Well, what if you're not good at math? What if you're not high achieving academically or in your career? What kind of pressure that is? And I was looking to this and I remembered that Asian American college students have a higher rate of suicidal ideation than white students. And because of that pressure to live up to this model minority.
Model minority myth. It has been said like that is a tool used by white supremacy to divide us even further from other BIPOC groups. What is also said for that too is that, you know, kind of like how Jerry has touched on, we've been pitted against each other to, you know, for especially like for white supremacists to compare Asians against Black groups, Latinx communities, and then assign these different traits to each group and making insidious comparisons.
You know, when COVID came out, we had a shelter in place and whatnot. I immediately, you know, now seeing what was happening in the news, I immediately was on guard. Like, I can't, if I go out and I'm with my kids, and if someone says something to me, how am I going to react? Am I going to give this person a learning moment, an opportunity to learn and grow? Or am I going to, I don't know, you know, it depends on what they say to me, right? I'm like, how am I going to react? And because I also recognize that I have to be a role model for my children as well, right? Hajin, I think we had talked about, you know, how do we raise racially conscious children, right? And so like I was on guard from day one, you know, knowing that when I step foot outside of my house and go to the grocery store, someone may say something to me. I might get hurt, right? And it's funny because we had already been a couple of months into the pandemic shelter in place, and my husband one day comes up to me, he's like, he's not Asian, so he was like, "Koo, you know, I don't think you should be going out to the stores. You should stay home. I'll be the one to go out to the stores, you know, so that I don't want anything to happen to you." I was like, "Honey, you're just thinking about that now. I thought about that, like, you know, since day one, once they announced COVID and that it came from China, and you know, you have folks calling it the China virus, right?" And
they say education is the great equalizer. Well, representation is the great equalizer for education. So what I mean by that is that we need more people in our community, from classified staff to teachers, to administrators, to elected officials, that accurately represent our demographics of our community. And if there was one thing that I could pinpoint, because I was not very politically active when I was in high school, when I was in college. It wasn't until I was 25 years old. It wasn't until my father opened my eyes to the inequities that were existing here in Sonoma County and in our state. It wasn't until he brought up the point that elected officials, when it comes to Latinx elected officials here in Sonoma County, it was under 10% or something ridiculous like that. And then school board members, it was almost like non-existent. That was almost 10 years ago, or over 10 years ago. You are now seeing more people of color that are being elected into school board positions, and this last election cycle, a lot more into city council positions, which is absolutely important. But I think when it comes to education, if you are at the dais and you're making decisions and voting on certain issues that you know are important to your community because you represent the bicultural or the people of color community, or you've experienced the bicultural experience, or you were raised by Mexican immigrant parents or Black parents, like if you associate with that experience, it makes you so much better at creating policy. But I think representation is so important. And
I think it's essential that we have representation because we're capable of having role models of any color. But when we have role models that have experienced the same challenges that we have, we truly can begin to believe that we can create realistic dreams and attain those goals. And that's really important. I don't want anyone to misunderstand. I am like forever indebted to every single one of the mentors that gave me advice and encouraged and supported me that was white, every single one of them. But they're never going to understand that it was 100 times more difficult for me than they ever thought it was going to be. And that's because I was a Latina, because I'm a morenita, because I'm dark.
And I am proud that Santa Rosa City Schools were in the process of implementing our own designed ethnic studies program. And we included in this course study race and ethnicity and gender and sexuality and class and social movements, history and literature. And that, you know, we have a board member, Omar Medina. I have to give him credit for this because he's really taken the helm on this curriculum. He brought that what he saw as a definite need to implement this, something that he felt when he was in high school and went through, you know, his college education about having school districts have not just have an ethnic studies program, but to make it a graduation requirement.
Like I said, a lot of, you know, the work that people see from mine is very explicitly about social justice. And I think for me, there's a couple of different ways that art, you know, can be a real change maker. But the one that I really focus on is like on the personal level. So a lot of my public art is, you know, they're portraits of either real people or kind of people that I have imagined. And they are all about planting the seed in people to help them believe in who they are and believing in their identity. I think when you do a portrait of someone, you know, typically portraits are, you know, and traditionally they were seen as something that's, you know, reserved for, you know, people of high class or people who can afford to have an artist do a portrait of them. So I think to do a portrait of, you know, quote unquote, ordinary individuals from my community, I think kind of validates their identity, validates who they represent. And I think it can be a huge empowering force.
Basically, that equity is vital for the availability of arts and culture. And I think it's you know, arts and culture is a portrait of a city. It shows its most ideal, its most inclusive, it's most like modernism, you know, the modernism of the city and like its population. So I think arts accessibility and to be able to be in the arts and to experience the arts at a young age is important. And so for me, it comes down to that, to being able to participate, for things to be provided across race and age and all these things. Also for open calls and opportunities to be available for diverse people in the society or in a city. So I think that's what it comes down for me. And then also, you know, that accessibility creates a larger proportion of voices, of diverse voices.
Well, Osio Osidawandawi, hello, good evening. How are all of you? And thank you again for, the opportunity to be here. We really appreciate the organization inviting us and inviting me to participate. So thank you. Well, we were talking in our pre-meeting as sisters, just talking about how varied and different across Indian country our nations are. And although we share similar ways of being in the world, how we walk through the spiritual realm and through the physical realm, and our practices and our values. We share many of those that are the same. And at the same time, for example, if you take our languages are different. It's not uncommon sometimes. I know Rose has mentioned this before, and we've talked about it, that, when we're talking with young people in the schools, and they can be older young people as well. But when they're asking us questions, often comes the question, do you speak Indian? And so that's an example of, they mean well, it's a genuine, honest question to ask. But it also really informs, again, folks that are in the audience and folks that are listening, that the stereotype is that if you're Indigenous, if you're Native American, if you identify as American Indian, that there is this stereotype and assumption that we all speak the same language, and that language is Indian.
And I want to perhaps pause with the kind of idea of even smaller or larger tribes being recognized, because that breakdown is not always true. There are a lot, especially in California, there are over 100 tribes, and they really vary in size. A lot of the rancherias are small populations. Many don't have a land base. A lot of times we think of, Indians that live on the reservation or grew up on the reservation. There are a lot of California tribes that, and elsewhere as well. I'm from California originally. I'm North Fork Mono, and a descendant of the Morongo Kuya, so that's what I'm most familiar with. And so the Morongo Kuya do have a reservation. North Fork Mono are landless. We've since gotten some land into trust, and I won't go down that long story. But the point being that there are a lot of nations that might have really large populations, large historical land bases that have not yet sort of achieved that federal recognition.
That someone else, some other entity is determining who we are and whether we can be acknowledged. And so I think that is the broader issue, that if I were just really dipping my toe into the water to study and learn and try to know about Indigenous people, that's huge, right? I mean, like, that's counterintuitive that we would allow other entities to tell us who we are. I mean, it does go back to the sovereignty that we talked about last time, and this time we determine who are members of our tribe. Or our nation. We are nations. We should behave as such. And then I think from a cultural, spiritual perspective, the only one who's ever going to determine or acknowledge me are my ancestors when I meet them in the spirit world. And that's it, right? I have a tribal ID. I'm a member of a tribe that's recognized by the state under under the federal government, under their parameters. But as long as my ancestors recognize me when I reach the spirit world, that's enough for me.
I know there's a big issue about missing and murdered women among Native American cultures. So, Rose, can you start us off and talk about that?
So the reason I wanted to, bring this topic up again, a lot of people, even within our own Native community, aren't fully aware of this epidemic that's been going on for a long time. And I think, compared to other communities, if someone in their community goes missing, an Amber Alert will go out, or some form of something on the news to get people's attention, keep an eye out for this person. And our women go missing 10 times as much as any other community. And there's only a few sites. Last time I mentioned the Sovereign Bodies Institute, which is one of the organizations that works around this epidemic, this topic of missing and murdered Indigenous women. And in their case, they do make flyers for our men and women that go missing from all communities. It includes the day they went missing, what they were wearing. It will include information if they were with someone, or if they have any type of mental health issues, they include that. And so they do a really good job of trying to help people get that message that our Indigenous women and men are just as important as any other person in the community that might go missing. And, unfortunately for those that are forgotten about, and those, particular people who are in these different situations do tend to come up murdered. And, you know, big prayers out to all of those families who have to deal with that heavy burden of not knowing what happened to their relative, you know. And I try to remember words that one of the elders at one of our missing and murdered Indigenous women marches said to me, and that it's not a direct quote, but it's similar to what she was talking to me about. And it's every time, you know, we're going out, we have to watch out for one another.
Amount, if we went through the list, right, of how many people from Divine Nine organizations are successful, high arching, reaching people in the world, we'd be here all night. But in particular, that's just one of Pride, because I think it's very present. And Kamala being a graduate of Howard in particular, and HBCU is another big, you know, thing for Pride. So I'm just glad you were able to share that.
Yes, yes. And you all touched on this just a little bit, but I'd like you to share a little bit more. Tell us about your experience with within your sorority and the impact that it's had on your life.
I will just say, it is one of those things that you don't really even know how important it will be to your life, because it just continues to grow. It is the sisterhood and it is the networking, but more than that, it is, you know, as we're going to talk a little later about working, you know, Black women working in and living in white spaces, it is knowing you have, you know, kind of a safe place to go and talk to your sisters.
I know for me, I've happened upon, it was kind of a happy accident. I became a member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated at Howard University, spring of 1996. And there's so much history in Howard University in and of itself. And then to be a member of Alpha Chapter, the founding chapter, and being able to walk on the campus where my founding women, you know, walked and met in 1920, and to be a part of that history was added another layer to the pride I already felt by going to Howard University, an historically Black university. It also, through my life, the first people that I call are my sorority sisters, my best friends in the world that I've met. I met through my organization, and we're still together. When I need an uplifting word, when I need help with an interview, when I'm worried about how do I look, what should I wear, on the community conversations on race, they said, wear your blue sweater. You know, so those are, you get those things with other friends and confidants as well. But then there's that underlying thread that binds us all together.
So my chapter really developed me professionally. I can even say now what I'm doing in my career has to do with our, you know, supporting our youth programs, our Promising Pearls programs, our Emerging Young Leaders programs. And I took those and I said, you know, if I can do that to the excellence, because, you know, we have very high standards, right? And if I can do it to this, I can do this in the world.
But I really want us as women, as Black women, as proud women, to really think about how often we dim our shine. Mm-hmm. And I'll say, okay, I'll dim, but you know what? It doesn't make you shine brighter, because I'm still peeking through. You know, well, my little shine still comes through there. So it's been very difficult, and being in the professional world, and you know, my family gets it, and oftentimes evenings end in tears of frustration of why do I have to do this song and dance?
That's the privilege, right? That I have to tell you my degrees and what I've done and who knows me and how I can make you feel comfortable before we can even have the conversation about whatever it is that we're really supposed to be talking about. And exactly. And again, my word is exhausting.
You're going to have to be twice as good as gold to be accepted as silver. Yes. I never understood what that meant until like the last 10 years of what that means, right? To be twice as good as gold to be accepted as silver.
So it's really encouraging to see, you know, the changes that are happening here in Sonoma County. It's also bittersweet. It's 2020, and we don't have that much longer left. We don't have that much left of this year. And so one thing, and I'm afraid of how jaded this might sound, but you know, I've heard so much talk this year of, oh, we have a seat at the table. We have a seat at the table. Okay, yeah, how long is the table? How long has the table been there? And we have a seat, but are we being fed? Are we being ignored? Are we simply just a pat on someone else's back for us having a seat at this table? I didn't ask for a seat at the table. I demanded a seat at the table. That's why we're here. And you're going to feed me. You're going to listen to me whether you want to or not.
What we need is mentoring also.
Yes.
And that's why I'm always offering myself as a mentor to anyone who is either a young woman, person of color, LGBTQ, whatever. Community leaders need to be mentored, regardless of their background, because what we need is a healthy community.
Yes, mentorship is, somebody said a phrase to me over the last couple of months that says, it's one thing to give and open up pathways of opportunity for BIPOC, but do not set your BIPOC up for failure.
Right, there's a lot of young people who are very energized for a space where they can be themselves, right? Can you imagine withholding? I can't imagine, I can't fathom going into this group and not being able to let you guys know that I am Mexican or Mexican American, or I am a male, or, you know, for a lot of these young people are dealing with this on a daily basis, where they have to show up to spaces withholding who they truly are and not identifying for being themselves.
I hope everybody's listening to these young people here talk. And I hope they don't take offense to me referencing them as young people in comparison to me and Mata. You're a little younger than us by generation, and yet your spirit is of older generation. And we have hope. I have hope as I listen to you this evening speak and share your hearts and your lived experiences. And Marta, you as well as an elder, still out there giving and working. And here we are, you know, this COVID-19 has really has taken a disproportionate toll on many of our indigenous communities in the United States. And you know, when I came into the world through the womb of my mother, you know, I came in a, you know, there was a march that she was in, you know, she was already fighting for justice. And it was in my umbilical cord, her umbilical cord to me. So the gift she gave me was, you know, that warrior incentive and the lifeline of justice that is there for our people. And my grandmother said, you will be tired at the end of the day. And the work that you're being called to do will be exhausting work. And they are both correct. As you've heard Amber, you've heard Adrienne, and you've heard Mata speak to, and Marcus, you know, this is work that is exhausting, and we wouldn't trade it for any other work in the world. I wouldn't, and I'm hearing them, and there is nothing you could do, and there's no dollar amount that you could put on anything more worthy than the journey that we are both, all of us, taken for social justice. So we take this responsibility not lightly, but with serious commitment to changing the world. Yes, I said the world, not just our local communities, not just Santa Rosa, not just Sonoma County, and not just California, but each effort that we make individually, collectively, and collaboratively together, we can be the change, as our brother said, that we want to see in the world. And I believe in that change. I work every day for it. As I said earlier, you know, I've been on lockdown, sheltered in place, whatever they want to call it. at home for 10 months. I live by myself with my dog. My daughter has come home when she's had break from school to see me. And I have a Pomo sister who stopped by monthly to check on me. And when I go out for essentials, that's my social life, standing in line with my mask on, getting a little bit of groceries. And even at home, we have this technology now called Zoom that allows you and I, and those of you that are tuning in, and you've been doing it for an hour and a half, and I know there's something else you could have been doing this evening, but you chose to Zoom in with us. So I know you're committed to change. And I thank you for this opportunity to just share a little bit about my journey and my hope. And I just invite us as we go into 2021 to continue in what I call a Mishnikwaha, ceremony of the heart. Whether I'm in lockdown or I'm free to move around as I please, ceremony is so important. To make my offerings to Mother Earth for food security, for the health of my daughter, for the health of our nation. Prayers that I send up through the smoke of the sacred sage that will bless this woman that's coming in of color to be our first Vice President of these United States. I pray for her daily. She will not have it easy, just like this man that they call Obama. He didn't have it easy, neither was she, and she's in the vice president's role. So I encourage you, whether you're a praying person or not, to think good thought, positive thoughts, to send out into the world in whatever way that you do that, whether it's to close your eyes humbly and to just see it happening, or pray in whatever way that you pray, so that we can continue to have these community conversations on race. Because Black Lives Matter, and George Floyd gave his life for that. And his legacy are the shoulders that we stand on today. What we do with that depends on each one of us. So I have hope in you, and I have confidence in you. And I wish you all the best over what they call this holiday season. Let these, Festival of Lights light your heart with fire, the fire that you hear in the passion of Amber when she speaks, and of Adriana when he tells you the stories of his grandmothers and his mother, and the legacy that you see of this vice president or vice mayor. She might be a vice president, but vice mayor up in Cloverdale, and our incoming vice president of the United States. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your prayers, and my very best to this organization that continues to do these conversations and invite us to this table. So thank you very much.